So now we're going to look at the principles of interpersonal conflict. And this is basically the things that are true about interpersonal conflict. The first thing is conflict is inevitable. We can't get out of it. It's a part of every interpersonal relationship. You do not want to try to stop your conflict or sweep it under the rug, as we say. It's something that you want to engage in. Conflict is good and healthy. If there is no conflict, you should be much more concerned than if you are actively having conflict. The second thing to keep in mind is conflict can have negative and positive effects. So we're going to look at both independently. What are the negative effects? Well, it leads to bad feelings, not only about yourself. You feel bad about yourself because of the way you're fighting, and you know that it's not fair, but you don't know how else to go about it. You also feel badly towards the other person, and you think that maybe they don't really care about you as much as they say because they seem to want their way and not give in to what your needs are. And so overall, you feel bad about yourself, you feel bad towards the other person, and you're very frustrated that you can't figure it out. You seem to love each other, but for some reason, you can't act in a loving way when you're engaged in conflict. Another negative effect is there's that resentment. You close yourself off. You think to yourself, there's no point in talking to this other person because we can't reach an agreement. And whatever I say doesn't really seem to be understood by my partner, or they just don't seem to know how to compromise or how to make sure both of us are getting our needs met. And last but not least, it increases our costs. And this means that when we look at the costs of our relationship and the rewards, basically what we say is, well, I have more costs and fewer rewards, because the costs that add up when conflict is not effectively managed tend to outweigh all of the rewards. Because when we fail at proper conflict management, it's not just one cost that we don't have good conflict negotiation skills. That's not the one cost. The costs are, I feel bad about myself every time I voice my opinion. I feel bad towards that other person, and I don't really like them that much because they're kind of selfish and petty. I don't think we have good communication skills because we can't seem to find a middle ground. And the list goes on and on. So just that one area that you don't have good conflict resolution, it doesn't produce one cost, it makes you come up with several costs. And then we tend to weigh this relationship in terms of costs and rewards, as social exchange theory tells us, and the costs are weighing a little bit more heavily than the rewards. The positive effects that can come from well-managed conflict resolution are it resolves problems. The problems we have in our lives and with our partner get resolved. Whatever issue or whatever needs aren't being met, you resolve it and come up with a solution that both of you are comfortable with. It also improves your relationships because, again, you feel like you're a team, you're working together, and you're not going to have to put your needs aside. This other person truly does care about your needs, and they're willing to meet you halfway, which is important. We want to feel valued enough that people are willing to either put some of their needs aside or make sure that our needs are met without them having to give up any of their needs. And last but not least, it demonstrates that I'm committed to the relationship. If my desire is to work out conflict effectively, then I'm saying to my partner, I want this to be a long-term relationship and I want it to be as pleasant as possible. That doesn't mean we're not going to deal with our conflict. It means we're going to, but we're going to do it in a positive manner, and we're going to use some of the techniques in this chapter to make sure that both people are being heard and both people's needs are being met. So conflict can focus on the content and or relationship issues. And when we say content issues, those are conflicts that arise about external issues. So objects, events, or people that are not part of our relationship. So you may argue about how good a movie was, what kind of movies to go see, what to watch on TV, how you spend your savings. You may argue about how nice somebody's parents are being to you. You may argue about something that your sister-in-law said or did. You may argue about how your partner is interacting with their boss. Those are all external things that are causing conflict. There's not conflict really between the two of you. Something outside of the relationship has happened that's causing conflict. And then the second thing that conflicts can focus on are relationship issues. And this means that we're fighting about who's in charge, who has equality in this relationship. Do we have equality in this relationship, or is the equality uneven? So the husband gets to go out with friends more often than the wife does, or the wife gets to spend more money than the husband does. Those are equality issues. There's also going to be an issue over who gets to establish the rules. Is it one person that's always making the rules and the other person doesn't have any rules? That also would cause conflict, because eventually somebody would say, wait a second, you get to make all the rules and I don't get to make any rules. And so it would be important that there's equality there, and when there's not, you're going to have an argument. Now, relationship conflicts they're usually disguised as content conflicts. So all of a sudden you're getting into a fight about where are we going to go on vacation, but really that's not what it is that you're fighting about. What you're fighting on is the power of deciding where you go on vacation. This person has more power, so they always get to choose. And then also the equality that you chose last time, I should get to choose this time. And so it's important that we don't think that relationship conflicts aren't happening very often. They are. They're happening just as often as the content conflicts are, but we may not understand them because content conflicts are a little bit easier to identify than a relationship conflict, because the relationship conflicts, those are the real deep issues and how we interact that aren't the surface level things about what do we watch on TV, what do we have for dinner, and those types of things. Or the fourth area that explains the principles of interpersonal conflict is that conflict styles have consequences, and that means that the type of conflict style you choose is going to impact whether or not you have negative effects or positive effects because of your conflict. So there's 5 styles. We're going to take a look at each. The first one is the competing style. And this means you have a great concern for your own needs and desires, but you have very little concern for the other person's needs and desires. So as long as your needs are met, everything's fine. And this means, in simple terms, it's an I win, you lose strategy. The next style is the avoiding style. And I want you to notice that this is the only time in which both people lose without gaining a thing. So the worst possible style is avoidance. Competing is better. Accommodating is better. Avoiding is by far the worst because we both lose out. There's no opportunity to even get my needs met. There's no opportunity for me to learn new conflict resolution skills. It just gets avoided and nothing happens, and the relationship literally breaks down without you knowing it, because you think, well, at least we didn't fight about it, but that issue didn't get resolved either. And so it's just going to keep coming up and keep coming up. And so avoidance is not a style that you want to choose. It's the worst of the 5. The third style that you can use is accommodating, and that means I'm going to lose so that you can win. My needs aren't important, your needs are very important, so it's okay if I just let you have your way. That is fine on some issues, but when you continually accommodate and you accommodate and you accommodate, you're going to end up being resentful, because what happens is you realize that this other person always gets their way and you never get your way, and that's not fair. Your needs are not going to go away. Eventually, you will absolutely blow a gasket because your needs aren't being met. And this happens when women have been married for 20 years, they've been accommodating the whole time, and finally, at year 21, they leave and ask for a divorce. And it's because they've always accommodated and they've just built up so much resentment that you can't possibly go back and start to compromise or start to collaborate. Now, the goal is, yes, you can, but it's very difficult after that many years of resentment, because you're not just chipping away at one incident in which you developed resentment. You're chipping away at years and years and years of resentment, and that's just a very, very, very thick wall to try and penetrate. The fourth style is collaborating. It's the I win, you win. We call this win-win. This is the style that you're going to be focusing on for your very last essay in this class. It's called paper number 2, the win-win paper. But basically what it is both of us gets our needs met. We listen to the perspectives and needs of the other person, and we achieve those needs. The best part about collaborating is I don't have to give up anything. It's an ideal situation, and most students are very, very confused because they know how to compromise, but they have no idea how to collaborate. We don't want to have to give something up if we don't have to. And if you spend time walking through the win-win steps, you will find out that collaboration is actually quite easy, and it's much, much more beneficial to both parties. And then last but not least is the compromising style. This is what we all think is the best way to go. It's not. It would be the second best way to go. So collaborating is number 1. That's what you want to attain in your conflict resolution. Compromising would be a second beneficial outcome, but it's not the best. It's an I win, you lose. So I do have to give up something. I have to meet you halfway. Some of my needs will be met, but some of your needs will also be met, but we'll also end up giving something up. So you can see why collaborating is great. I don't have to give up anything and my needs get met. So that was just a quick look at those conflict styles. Another principle, and the last principle we need to look at, is that conflict is influenced by culture. What does that mean? Well, that means that the topics that we fight about are going to be different. So a high context culture, they fight about violations of group norms, and that basically means you have to go along with everybody else and what they're doing. You don't want to be different from the group. You don't want to stand out from the group. Whereas a low context culture, they fight about the personal norms. So my personal rules or my personal normal, when that's violated, we're going to fight about those types of things. The nature of conflict is going to be affected by our culture, and that's how we define conflict. What do we think about it? Americans have more of a tendency to think of I have to win in this conflict. That's the competitive nature in Americans. Whereas in Japanese culture, they're more okay with compromise, and their resolution should be much more amicable. And we all want to make sure that the face of a Japanese person, meaning their positive and negative face, is not as threatened. In American culture, when we fight, we tend to threaten the face, positive and negative, of our partners more often. And then conflict strategies are going to be a little bit different depending on the culture. For example, African American females were more controlling. They tended to spearhead the conflict and begin with their point of view. And white females were more solution-oriented than African American women. And whereas black men and white men, they're more similar. They both tended to avoid or withdrew from the conflict. And of course, we know that that's not the best case scenario. Last but not least are the organizational norms, and that means the cultural norms of organizations will influence the types of conflicts. In some work environments, it's okay to express to a high-level manager that your needs aren't being met. It's okay to say, I have a problem and I'd really like you to help me solve it. However, some corporations and some corporate cultures would not accept that, and it would be cause for you to be on a short list of people that don't work well with others, even though all you're trying to do is resolve a conflict.